joining us on the Scrunch YouTube channel / podcast. We're super excited to have you here. We have been in the same industry and worked together on and off for years now. So I'm super excited that you could join us. And why don't we just kick things off by, I guess, telling people, so you obviously run the Exposure Co, the influencer agency, and would love you to tell everyone how you got here. So what led you to starting that business and what the business does and kind of where you're at today?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. Do you know what is really embarrassing out of all this? That we have been working together for so long, but I don't think I've ever actually met you face to face in person. We've had so many over Zoom interactions, but nothing face to face.
Isn't it crazy? That's such the vibe of today too, like technology, virtual meetings. It's we need more wines in real life.
We do. Yeah. It's a disgrace.
I know.
But so rewind back to 2015, which is when we started the Exposure Co, myself and my business partners. We were all working in digital marketing, mainly in SEO at the time. I guess just being young and into social media, I thought social media is where we want to be. And that's where my business partners were keen to sort of venture into as well. I guess being in that digital marketing space, we also did notice in client meetings when we were going to talk about SEO that clients were talking about bloggers. And I don't think the word influencer was around then, or potentially just starting, but it was a lot to do with, bloggers, and then bloggers having these social media followings on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. So we started the Exposure Co. Actually, probably a year prior, we started working on it just in our spare time, sort of building up the business. The main reason we started it at the time was because, and if only Scrunch was available then, was because we were working with a few clients that were having trouble finding bloggers and finding these influencers. So we thought surely there's a better way to sort of do this. And so
a good, problem and solution,
exactly,
best reason to start a business.
But I mean, what that meant was literally Excel spreadsheets, trawling through these spreadsheets manually. We'd pull the data and then we would outreach to the influencers and then hope that they would sign up to our database. So it was just a lot of manual labor at the time, a lot of sort of Friday nights working late with our wines, getting that done. But I guess in doing that as well, we also got to learn a little bit about the influencers and actually start chatting with them, and also, I guess, focusing on the client side of things, which influencers would work for what type of brands. I guess over the last then 7 years, nearly 7 years.
Time flies, yeah.
Oh my God. We've just sort of evolved. We're very much service based. So we are basically the middleman between our clients and the influencers. So we're there as much as our client need us to be. So we could be potentially like an in-house influencer marketing manager for a client who is potentially doing sort of always on ongoing work. Awesome. Or potentially for clients who are looking to do a one-off campaign here and there, that's when we can jump in. And in terms of strategy and things like that, sometimes clients come to us, they've got it all figured out. We just have to sort of fit in the influencers, or others might come to us really green and saying, hey, we need to start from sort of the start. How do we go about creating that strategy for our brand and working that from there? So it's very interesting. The space has evolved a lot over the last few years. And even still this year, just constantly there's news, there's new regulations, there's new potential social media channels, there's new influencers popping up, there's new everything. So it's constantly evolving. I still feel like it is a very sort of new industry, although we have matured a lot over the last few years. I never have to explain now what an influencer is,
That
which is
must feel
fantastic.
nice.
For the first couple of years, I just said I worked in social media. It was too
Yeah.
hard.
I know. Sometimes if I'm meeting someone outside of marketing, I just say I work in marketing.
Yeah.
It's easier. It's easier. Otherwise, they're like, influencers? What? Who are you? Are you an influencer? I'm like, no.
Yeah. Oh, you're the influencer. Oh gosh, no.
Mind you, I wish I had 1 million followers. That might be
Oh,
cool.
I know, but honestly, people always give influencers a hard time.
Mm.
It is, sorry, anyone who's giving influencers a hard time, get on and try and grow your own following.
Yeah.
Your own engaged following. It's tough.
Yeah, I mean, we'll speak to any brand, right, who's trying to build their following. You know, it's kind of makes me laugh because I'm like, it's exactly the same on the brand side. You are trying to build a level of influence around the industry that you're in, and you're struggling to gain Instagram followers or TikTok followers, and then you kind of turn around to this influencer who's done the hard yards and kind of having a go at them.
Totally, it's really tough, and even it's funny looking at the influencers who were around when we first started. Watching them evolve, and also them who have millions of followers, and they're going, oh no, how do I keep up with these young ones on TikTok? Like even the experts that have been around for so long in the space. It's really challenging. So I take my hat off to them.
Totally. And I think you're right. It does like change every year, right? It's almost like every year a new social platform crops up and there's new rules and new strategies, and keeping up is equal parts why I love influencer marketing, but equal parts why it's like, oh my God, you've always got to be across everything.
Yeah, I feel like it's just a very fast-paced industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether it be in terms of how the industry is changing, or just, and maybe that's just marketing in general, but just how clients work as well. It's just always, it's a very fast-paced industry.
Yeah. And I mean, so you mentioned a couple of things. So, you know, people doing always on strategies, and you kind of being almost like a member of their team implementing that, and then people that are kind of more campaign driven. Do you have a viewpoint on that? Because it always surprises me when people, you know, think of influencer marketing as kind of this one-off thing, but then don't do that in other marketing strategies. So I'd love your opinion on what kind of works best.
Yeah, look, ideally, if budget was no issue, I would be saying trial as much as you can. I think that the tough thing is often clients want to sort of dip their toe in influencer marketing and trial it out a little bit. Yeah. And fair enough, particularly if you do have a small marketing spend. But you really do need to test the waters in order to find that perfect match for your brand. And a lot of our clients say, you know, who should we use? Who's going to provide us the best ROI? And just because Lucy from the previous campaign did a really good job for that brand doesn't mean that she's going to do a fantastic job for this new brand. So in an always on strategy, we are able to test with different pools and different types of influencers. So we do always find that in the long term works much better. Yeah. And then what we normally recommend with that is, once you find that, I guess, golden influencer that works really well, that's when you can engage them as an ambassador long term. So that's another thing. Clients often come to us and say, we need an ambassador, who should we use? And our recommendation often there is to actually try a pool of influencers first, run a campaign where you're actually testing out a few different ones. Again, if you have the budget, and then figuring out who are the top performers from that campaign to then engage long term. Because I'd hate to lock someone in for a 12 or 24-month campaign and they're a complete flop for that brand, even though they did a fantastic job for the other brand. Yeah. So test.
Well, I mean, it's super interesting, you know, and you would know this coming from a marketing background as well, but it's the same principle as, you know, if you're doing Google ads or social ads, that idea of testing and learning is kind of exactly the same, you know, but in an ad scenario, you're testing different copy, different audiences, different images. And so it sort of surprises me when it's like in the ad world, you know, you don't get it right first time. You've got to iterate and test and then go, okay, well, this works really well. Let's, invest more there. It's kind of the same with influencers, right? So exactly what you said,
totally.
testing different types of influencers, different types of content before you kind of figure out what suits your brand, and you can kind of double down on that.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. I remember early on, you would often read articles or about influencers who had done a post and then the brand had sold out in like 2 hours or something like that. And I guess the problem now is that the space is a lot more saturated, and we do see instances where sales go through the roof from influencers.
Yeah.
But it's not that's not the only benefit as well that influencer marketing can bring. And I think maybe potentially with all those, you know, articles earlier on, like X influencer, you know, sold 1,000 products in 2 hours. That was often the narrative around influencer marketing. Yes. And if I was a brand, I would be looking at that and going, well, I want that, of course. Yes.
Oh, all I have to do is find one influencer. Amazing.
Exactly. And let's engage this same one that did it for that brand, even though our brand is completely different. Yes. But so there is, and so there does need to be a lot of client education around that. But yeah, I think now clients are getting more and more educated in the space. A lot of them have often tried influencer marketing themselves, and then they've gone, okay, this is actually way harder than I thought.
Yeah.
And then that's sort of when they get us in.
So maybe let's expand on that. So if we've got maybe a new brand that's watching and they're kind of going, okay, should I actually dabble in influencer marketing and do it myself? What is involved in bringing a campaign to life?
Yeah. And look, I often recommend this to give it a go because it is a really good. Yeah. No. Well, more so just because you will probably the brand will probably learn a lot about their target market in that way. They'll figure out, I guess, they'll do a bit of research into what type of influencers they would want to work with. And also it's a really cost-effective way to do it as well. So they don't have to spend any money potentially if they're just gifting items as well.
Yeah.
So what I would say to a brand starting out, I would say first up, figure out who your target market is. See, then this is tricky because our next step in this process is to figure out then a pool of influencers who could potentially work, and then looking at their follower insights. So potentially you need a platform like Scrunch that
quick plug, love it.
That can show you that in a really cost-effective way, that you can jump in and check out the influencers that you've started looking at on Instagram or TikTok or wherever, and making sure that they actually align with your target market. So if it's females, making sure they have a really high percentage of female followers. If it's Australian only, making sure they have a high percentage of Australian followers, that sort of thing. Looking at engagement rate as well. There are a lot of free tools online where you can look at engagement rate, but you just can't delve further into their follower insights. So that would be the next step. Yeah, when you're compiling your list of influencers to outreach to, I would make sure that that list is a lot larger than the amount of influencers that you plan to work with, just because you'll find that not everyone will get back to you. And that's just the fact of the matter. I wish everyone was 100% keen to work with every brand, but a lot of the influencers have full-time jobs, or potentially they're already working with a competitor. So you just need to make sure that you've got a bit of a buffer there when you're outreaching to them. The next step would be to put together a brief for the influencers. So making sure that you're covering what you want them to do with their posts. In this step, we also negotiate, or we also like to send through a contract so that the influencers are sort of locked into that contract.
And while we're on briefing and contracting, how flexible do you think, because I always get asked this question, how creative should we let the influencers be? Do you have a, I guess, perspective on briefing and how specific you should be, or how fluid it should be? Yeah, love your thoughts on that while we're at this stage of the process.
Well, if I could just tell them about the brand, how many posts they needed to do, handle hashtags, and a 1-sentence brief personally, and then the influencer to take it from there with their own creative freedom. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah.
We're engaging influencers obviously because they're the ones that know their audience, and they're the ones that have created this audience. So we need to work in with their tone of voice. So I personally like the brief to be really simple. I think sending through a mood board is really important. So you can give them sort of inspiration, but also making sure that inspiration is in line with the influencer's feed. So you might find that mood boards, even though it's for the same client, might be a little bit different per influencer in line with, you know, what they often do.
That's actually great advice. So I've not heard that. So oftentimes I see clients that do a mood board that really suits their aesthetic. So, because I guess what they're concerned about is that an influencer will create an image and it'll be so off-brand that they won't be able to repost it on their feeds. But I love the blending of the two, of kind of going, yes, it absolutely has to uphold our brand aesthetic, but we need you to relate to it and create content that's going to make sense for you. So I love the idea of customizing it for the influencer as well.
Exactly. Yeah. We had a situation with a client where they wanted the product to be featured, but not the influencer, which is quite rare. Often it is the influencer and the product. But in this case, one of the influencers that we were working with, it was a bit tricky because her engagement comes from her being featured. So if she was to upload something without her alongside the product, her audience just wouldn't respond well to that. So we actually just had to find a middle ground where the product was 100% the feature and still presented in a way that fit the brand's aesthetic, but also integrating that into the influencer's feed. Otherwise, it would have just got lost in all the other posts and the engagement would have gone down incredibly.
Yeah, no, that's super important too. I think that you know, people don't realize, I guess, the bespoke nature of influencer marketing. You know, if you do an Instagram ad, it's kind of the same ad and it's just going out to different people. But with influencer marketing, the actual ad, which is the content creation, is so custom and so bespoke. And I think, you know, we kind of touched on this when we started talking about the process and why it's good to go through the process yourself sometimes. Because of that, there's so much interaction with every influencer and really making sure that you communicate with them, both what has to happen from a brand point of view, but what's going to be best for them as well. To get the most out of influencer marketing.
Yeah, it really is about, well, for us in our role, it's about sort of managing expectations from both sides and finding a really happy balance that's going to obviously work for the brand, because the brand's the one that's paying for the post.
Yes.
The influencer's receiving the payment. So they are doing a job for that brand. But also making sure that we do trust that influencer and their creative control as well.
And I think that's a really good point, because people, like we said, how hard is it to build a following? They've built this following based on understanding what their audience wants and what their audience is interested in and engages with.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So we've reached out to 1 billion influencers.
Yes.
We've briefed them, we've contracted them. So now I guess the magic happens where the influencer does the job.
Yes. So we send them the product. We make sure that we have tracking for the product, because particularly at the moment, product is getting lost everywhere with Australia Post. So making sure that we can really track that. So we make sure when the influencer gets the product as well, so we can chase them up. So then the fun part is obviously the creating of the content by the influencer. Again, they should all have their briefs by now, so they should be pretty across what they need to do. I definitely recommend requesting in the brief that you can have a look at drafts before they go live. Make sure that, you're happy with the content as a brand, and also that they're tagging the right handle and they're spelling your brand name correctly, and there are no spelling mistakes in the captions, just things like that. That often a second pair of eyes can be really good to look over that. And then once everyone's happy with the content, it's about scheduling that post to go live. In this instance, I normally like to go with the influencers recommendation on this, obviously, because there isn't a one size fits all best time to post on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. We find that it really does differ per niche for the influencers. So sometimes we find that mummy influencers are better, really early in the morning when they get up really early, or potentially, at midday, or just before midday when their little one's having a sleep. Or we might find that, young corporates are better, outside of work hours because they can't get on their phone during work, things like that. So it really does depend on the influencer's audience, but they will be able to tell you through their analytics on their own account. So you can ask to have a look at that if you'd like. And then once the post goes live, it's really important to get screenshots of all the analytics to see how the post went. Because you can probably only see part of that as sort of a follower or an outsider. Things that I really like to look at are shares and saves. I think that they're really important metrics to look at. I think a save is really, really important because it normally means, I can't purchase that right now, or, I can't look into that right now, but I'll do that later.
Super interested in it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'll look at that later. And then shares, it might be someone sharing it with a friend because they think they might like the product or something like that. So definitely having a look at those insights. And yeah.
Cool.
I probably should have mentioned as well, tracking through a discount code or a tracking link on, if you can, because then you can actually see the traffic to your website.
Well, I think that's an interesting point too, because I think, one thing you said was you can only see so many of the analytics on your end as the observer or the brand. So yes, getting the screenshots is super, super important, but every now and again someone doesn't send them through, and or you get over following up. So if you've got that on the back end where you've given them a coupon code,
of course,
then that's cool too. Kind of rounds out your view of how well the campaign did.
Of course, and that's ultimately, I would think, why people want to do marketing. It's because they want sales or they want click-throughs to the website. So having those in place are really important, and also making sure that those links are working.
Yes. And that you have a well-performing website as well.
And that
keeping your socials up to date.
When you plan to put those influencer posts live, that there's no scheduled maintenance or anything like that. I know it sounds obvious, but sometimes when you're thinking just about the influencers, you forget to think about your own website. There's so many things going on. So yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. So, love the idea of a brand kind of dipping their toe in the water first to kind of really get an understanding of the process, their customers, the types of influencers that might be working well. But I mean, as you have just stepped it out, I'm like, that's why you exist, right? Because it's a process. So being able to hand that over to somebody like you who has done it 1,000 times before, knows the challenges, knows the ins and outs, and can probably shortcut a lot of time, you know, is amazing. And I think how our industry has been evolving. So can you share any challenges? So out of all of the campaigns that you have delivered, you know, are there any challenges that a brand should look out for in influencer marketing, or any not to do's, any tips on what, you know, if we can save anybody making a mistake? I always love to get a tip on how to overcome that.
Yeah. I think the first thing would be to figure out what your, I guess, guidelines are for your specific industry. So obviously there's been a lot of information lately about the TGA guidelines around those therapeutic goods. So if your brand, for instance, falls under that industry, making sure that you're aware of what an influencer can and can't say, that's really important. It is also different across the different social media channels as well. So we're finding that although you might be able to promote a product on Instagram, you might not be able to promote that on TikTok. So doing a bit of reading first up to figure out, you know, where you can promote your brand, and also what are the rules and regulations around that is really important. If you're, I mean, the easy one is alcohol, for instance. So the influencer and the majority of their audience has to be over the age of 25 years old in order to promote an alcoholic beverage. So that's something that a lot of brands don't know. And there are also certain guidelines around how that content can be created and where it can be created and things like that. So that would be
I love that you've just brought that up as well, because I just read an article the other day where an influencer wasn't promoting alcohol. They were promoting another brand, but they had alcohol in the little skit that they did, and they actually so they actually got reported to the advertising body. That's right. I mean, essential, but they actually got reported to the advertising body because they were consuming alcohol whilst doing, you know, an activity that maybe could have put them in danger. So really interesting that you do need to think almost, yes, your industry and what is allowed and not allowed, but also just, you know, more broadly, like, so the content that's coming back, oh my gosh, it might be hilarious. But as a brand, you do have a responsibility to really think about the content and how it might be perceived as well.
Yeah, definitely. And there are a lot of people out there watching at the moment, and there are a lot of people filing complaints. So you do need to be really careful with what you put online as a brand. And I guess that comes back to checking the influencers' content as well. I think there was a time back in the day where we could just get the influencers to post, but I think, I mean, if it's in a really sort of easy industry and it's about, you know, promoting a fashion item or something like that, that can look really nice if an influencer can just integrate that into their feed or across their stories, and you probably wouldn't need to look at that. But if you are really putting a big investment in for the campaign, I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah. And, you know, you just never know what might come up. You know, I guess the thing is with influencer marketing is you're dealing with individuals, you know, you're not just dealing with a Google ads or a Facebook ads or whatever. You are dealing with all of these individuals who have their own values and perspectives and things that they, you know, do and represent on their channels. So, you know, just something that they might not have thought was an issue may just randomly be an issue in your industry. So just that kind of eye over everything is not such a bad idea.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the influencers won't or aren't expected to know every single rule about every single industry. So I think it is often up to the brand to come to the table with those sort of guidelines in place that then they can pass on to the influencers. And if the brands don't know that, then it's something that we can help with as well.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And that's why I do love, working with like dedicated influencer agencies, is because you've actually done, this is your whole life, you've done that research and you understand different industries and what's going to be important and any kind of gotchas so that the campaign can run a lot more smoothly.
Yeah. Where I always think that my role or our role is to just professionalize how you could run your own campaign and make it much more seamless and easy and no dramas. Make that a really professional interaction. Because it often isn't if you have to run it yourself. So
and it's interesting you say that too, because oftentimes the influencer piece sits inside PR or marketing or social. So someone's managing the campaign that has a whole lot of other stuff to do as well. So sometimes dramas and inefficiencies just come up because they're not that sole person. They're not dedicated to influencer marketing. And I think influencer marketing is a full-time job.
Yeah, for sure. And we're seeing that too. Brands hiring influencer managers in-house, because you do, particularly if you're doing it always on, you do need someone there negotiating and chatting with the influencers and approving posts and sending out contracts and everything like that, even just coming up with strategy. So it's very exciting. It's definitely a part of a lot of brands' marketing spend.
Awesome. And so, okay, my last question for you, which is probably, good that you said that, a lot of brands are starting to invest in influencer marketing. What is your hot tip for 2022? How do you think the industry has evolved? What's new? What's happening? What can we all expect to see out of influencer marketing this year?
That is such a good question, and it's an answer I should definitely have. But I feel like we're really stepping up as an industry. I feel like it's up until now, the last couple of years, we're really, like I said, professionalizing the space. And I think what we're going to see this year is a lot of spend going towards influencer marketing, and therefore coming out of that, really awesome creative campaigns, really sort of out of the box type stuff, which is very exciting. I'm excited to see sort of brands that potentially you don't necessarily think about using influencers, delving in and starting to use influencers across channels that potentially we're not using as much as well. So it's funny. I know that TikTok's been around for a really long time now. Well, in this industry, a long time, a couple of years. And I think that it's definitely here to stay. For instance, Instagram, I don't know, as much as people love-hate relationship, as much as people want Instagram to die, I just don't know. I just think it's a beast. I think we're gonna see that continue.
And I think that they're also developing tools for creators.
I
think they're doubling down on, as much as from a brand point of view, we go, the reach is declining, engagement's declining, blah, 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 blah. But Instagram are investing in influencers and creators. So I think that's a tell that it isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I think, and I hope we're going to see some new channels as well.
Another one, really?
I just don't know how that's going to look. Yeah, but
if history is anything, we get new channels every year or two, so it has to happen.
But it's funny because the same ones we were talking about 7 years ago are still the leaders now anyway, really.
Yep.
I mean, YouTube, we get campaigns for YouTube a lot. A lot of brands want to still be on YouTube, and it's been around for an age.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm interested to see how that plays out. But I think the influencers, whether it's a new channel or not, I think that those influencers will flow to those channels anyway. So it's not like, yes, we will see new influencers popping up on those channels, but they're probably going to be on Instagram, and they're probably going to be on TikTok as well. So a lot of the TikTokers, for instance, who have done really well and have grown a really large following, do also now have, followings on Instagram, because that's where people are. And also that's where brands are. So I guess for an influencer, it's important to be where both the people and the brands are as well. So yeah, I don't know. I wish I had like a golden nug to share that I think.
I think that that's it, right? So it's professionalism, regulation, influencer marketing. It's here to stay. It's legit. You've got to think about it as an important business process and have a process for it. But then I think, your other point is we've got to know what's coming. We've got to be flexible. There's going to be new platforms, there's multi-channel. So kind of doing that research and really understanding what's around is going to be super important for anyone considering influencer marketing.
Definitely. And I think that's part of the exciting part of it for us, really, is that it's going to evolve, and we've got to keep up with that. And I think we all can, because we've done it so far. So
exactly. I know that's marketers for you,
Well, that's it.
Not a creative problem.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, there's no way that when I was studying marketing at uni that they were talking about, I don't even think they were talking about social media. No, they weren't. There was one digital marketing where we sort of worked on websites and things like that. But think of how now the space has changed and how reliant we are.
To me, but it was MySpace in my day.
Oh, it was also MySpace in my day.
I think that profile is still on the internet.
Oh, that was a huge part of like learning how to code.
Yeah, exactly. I can copy and paste HTML like nobody.
Totally.
Oh, amazing. All right. Well, you are fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on the Scrunch Influencer Marketing channel. I know that everyone who's watched today will have gotten a lot of value. So I really appreciate your time, and cheers for coming on.
Cheers. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Amazing.